We're just having too much fun here, forgetting to hit the live button. Good morning, everybody. We're live. Congratulations. You made it through the week. It's Friday. Congratulations. Pull up a chair. Join us for a food safety chat here on this Friday. First off, I want to know that you understand that Jill, Tia, and I really appreciate what you do and everything you do for food safety and quality assurance and making sure that the food that we eat is safe. So before we even begin, thanks, everybody. We really appreciate what you're doing. So if you're new to the Food Safety Chat, my name is Bryan Armentrout, and I am with the Food Leadership Group. And every Friday at this time, I bring on amazing experts in the field of food safety and quality assurance and talent development and these type of activities. And we talk about a topic. And what you're going to notice here is if you're new, number one, this is not a presentation. This is a discussion. And I'm sure Jill and Tia will agree with this, is the fun part of this is the interaction and sharing this information, because as we all know, food safety, not a point of competition. We're all in this together and we all eat. So with that, Jill and Tia with Catalyst, how are you guys doing today?
Hello. We're happy to be here.
We are. And Bryan, I love how you kicked it off, because so often, right, we are so driven on like, we have work to do. It's Friday. We have to get these things done. But I love your pause of like, let's just appreciate how much work each person out here is doing.
Yeah.
And it matters. Like the work you do matters, even if anybody hasn't told you that today. It's spectacular.
Absolutely. And it's kind of one of those things, this is just one of those truisms in life, is at home or at work, it doesn't matter. When you start a task and you start working on something, what does that do? It always identifies two other things that you need to do. Right? You start cleaning the garage and then you're like, oh man, that's right, I need to wax the car. It just adds to more stuff. So sometimes it's really healthy to sit back and just take stock of everything that you've done. And it's amazing when you think about it, isn't it?
Yes,
it is.
It really is.
Very much so. Yes.
Yeah. So one of the things
we have people popping in. Good morning.
Yes,
Hello.
good morning, Duncan. Good to see you. Rufata, I'm sure I just absolutely destroyed her first name, so sorry about that. Good morning. So one of the things that we love to do on the chat here, number one, is say hi, because we're building a community here and we love to hear what people are saying. And we also say, where are you? I'm in Loveland, Colorado, where today, guys, it's saying it may be record high temperatures. So 83, 84 degrees, maybe here in Colorado.
Wow, really?
Crazy, right?
Yeah. I hope that stays over west. We don't need that over here in Minnesota. These 60-degree days are perfect right now.
Oh, yeah. This is a great time of year. And Tia, are you back home now as well?
I am. I'm north of Baltimore, and it's nice and sunny today. It's cool. I guess it's in probably the upper 50s, lower 60s, which is perfect Jill weather. But it is really perfect fall weather, I would say.
Absolutely. I love it tomorrow. Andrew's in Maine. Nice to see you, Andrew. So part of this as well is, number one, on LinkedIn, if you're not connected with Jill Stuber and Tia Glave with Catalyst, you need to be connected. And one of the things that I noticed this week on LinkedIn is, holy moly, you two have been busy. What's been up in your world?
Yes, October has been busy. It's like the month for all food safety professionals to get together in many different areas. And we love being there because we love connecting with people and talking about what's going on. You know, if you know us, we're all about leadership in the technical field. So we love talking about like what's getting in the way, what's stopping you from stepping into that leadership role, what skills do you need, which I know we're going to talk a little bit about today. And, you know, we love just being in that space and talking about food safety culture and coaching and all the above.
And it's been awesome because not only have we been at shows, but, you know, this is the time of year that a lot of quality teams and organizations are having like their annual quality or food safety events. And so, you know, we do workshops. So we've been on site doing that. Yeah. And then periodically, like, you know, I kind of even like wiggle our way into things. I had a friend who posted an agenda for, it was called Bridge to Food. I was there yesterday and it was about plant-based products and what's emerging. I saw the agenda and I'm like, there's nothing on food safety. And she's like, well, maybe you should come because it was in Minneapolis. I'm like, you bet I'm going to be there.
Mm.
So it's fun just to even be able to step into different spaces where they're not typically thinking first about food safety and being able to help bring that perspective to say, in these new areas when we're talking about, right, like new applications and new ingredients, like how do we get in this together so that, right, food safety isn't left behind when it finally comes to the spot where we're ready to commercialize, or hopefully way before that with formulations and validations.
No, absolutely. Yeah, and that's a really good point, because a lot of times, right? So if you're an entrepreneur and you're like, "Oh, cool, I want to create this new synthetic food, or this analog for meat, or things like this," it's all about getting business off the ground and finding customers and cash flow and investors. And then a little later on, we come along and we're like, "Got a question here about food safety," and they're like, "What? Food safety?"
Right. Yes.
Yeah. I love telling all those folks, like, don't make your teams guinea pigs. Like, we don't know if it's safe, and you're trying it in the, as you're doing research on it. So
right, exactly.
Yeah. We always talk about our small businesses, like incorporating food safety early is definitely the key, because we run into people that are looking for opportunities to grow, and people are starting to ask those questions around food safety, and no one has the answers, or the programs haven't been built. And then it's like crisis mode, right? Like, oh, we need to get on the shelf, so we need to do this in 2 months. And when you're coming from nothing, we all know, I know the people in the audience know, to build a food safety management system, right? It's like that takes longer than 2 months to do. And so we like to talk with our small businesses early on. Think about ways that you can start to build your food safety programs and your culture, and how's it integrated into your work. Because once you get moving, it's hard to go back. It's not easy to go back. You can go back, right? That's what we do, right? Help people get up to compliance even though they've been running. But it's a lot more difficult and a lot more expensive.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point, Tia, because part of the saying that I have with senior management is the time you need these things is before you need them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
So with that, and so good morning. So Austin's been traveling a ton too. So nice to see Austin here. Ernest, Tyler, Alexis, good to see you guys. Before we jump in here any further, because we're behind on this, everybody join us. Cheers.
Cheers. Oh, you and that Tennessee advertising there. Tennessee love.
It is. It's the third Saturday in October, so we're playing Alabama.
Oh, I was watching last week Tennessee play a game, and my wife was absolutely amazed when you watch the crowd. Everybody sits in the checkerboards, right? The orange and the white, and it's perfect. How do they get everybody to do that?
It's a secret. Just kidding. There's actually so this was started like many years ago. Someone actually calculated what needed to happen, like what seats needed to be what color to get it into the checkerboard. And now there's a website. So every time they want to do the checkerboard, you just go to the website, put in your seats, and you're able to do you wear orange shirt or white shirt.
Oh. And what if I'm a belligerent, too much to drink fan, and I don't so I'm sitting there, it's like, no, I'm wearing black, right?
No, you can wear whatever you would like. It is a suggestion, but because the stadium's so big, you'll probably just look like a little dot anyway. So
and everybody going, boo on you, sir. Boo.
Right. You have on the wrong color.
Oh,
everyone's welcomed.
And Austin, so true. Yes, I am a competitive person. So I enjoy sports, and I'm like rah, even if I don't even know the sport, right? Like if I'm like, oh, we're going for this team, okay, let's go. So I am competitive, and we are in our competitive games right now. So
it's a fun time of year. And so kind of what we were talking about here a little bit ago, and let's test out my segue ability here. So we were talking about how important it's to have planning and looking at the future and preparing your food safety plans. The other piece of this is the future of your workforce.
Great segue. Nice done, Bryan.
After 3 years, I'm getting better at this, aren't I? So part of what we wanted to talk about here, and this is why I love having Jill and Tia on, because as we talk about on here all the time, and sometimes repetition is the best way to learn things, is technical skills are great, but you also need to develop your people skills, your soft skills, and also figure out what in the world is coming down the pike, because things change all the time. And we've done shows here on artificial intelligence and things of this nature. I was on a conference call for one of my clients yesterday, and I was thinking about this because the logistics guy for the company he's fantastic. He's very proactive, always finding better ways to do things. And I was thinking about what he does relative to logistics and strategizing and planning out storage and all these type of things. And I'm like, 10 years from now, it's probably going to be AI doing all of that work.
Fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah.
To think about where AI is all being used and how it's being used.
Yes. It's one of those things, Bryan, when you said even just about food safety management systems, like you need it before you need it, right? I think it's the same thing with technology and where AI is going. You know, if it's one of those things that we don't know really, like some groups, of course, understand how they're going to use it and what solutions they're providing, but like it's changing, right? And for us that's not a part of developing AI, right? Like we're watching it happen and things coming up to us just as consumers or even businesses that want to purchase AI. But if that's something that you're interested in, even just like from a business standpoint, you need to start researching that now, right? And thinking about how that's going to change your business into the future and plan for it.
Yeah. I also saw a video this morning on LinkedIn of an Amazon warehouse that had robots, like you remember those robots you see, like where it's like the dogs and then they kick them and the robot kind of little, and it gets straight back up. So it looks like that same type of technology, but these were stand-up robots, and they were kind of doing the little walk that they do, and they were moving around boxes and preparing orders in an Amazon warehouse.
Interesting. You know, it's come more and more of that is definitely coming.
It is. And whether it's robots or yesterday at the event I was at, they were 3D printing food.
Really?
Yep. So, want a cheesecake? We're going to 3D print a little mini cheesecake. You want a steak? We're going to 3D print a steak. So it's fascinating to think how people are looking ahead to, they thought it would be like in a smart kitchen, like where you would just be able to plug in what you want and then it kicks out what you need. And I'm like, wow, that's fascinating.
Huh. Yeah.
Actually, it was a little mind-blowing to see it because I just had lots of food safety questions. But
right.
Yeah. My next question was, did they let you taste it?
No.
Good.
So, but it's interesting because actually this week we were having a discussion with someone who has done some AI technology. And he said, one of the things that's really scary is kind of this thought of AI being like a black box. Like you put stuff in and then you get stuff out.
Yeah.
Right.
But what's all happening in here?
Yes.
And this company said, they've developed something where that's known to know what's happening, or at least until it starts doing some of its looking for patterns. But I think that's a really interesting part of AI in terms of, especially right in our field, we always have to validate what's happening. We need to verify that it's working. So I have no answers, just lots of questions.
Yeah. Agreed.
Well, and that's a good observation on that side too, because part of what makes for a good manager or just a good person in general in your entire life is you need the ability to zoom in and focus on something and really, figure it out and really dive into the details. But if you stay there, that's a mistake. You need to also pull back and look at things, because more times than not, I will end this chat with this phrase, which is, okay, guys, let's think about this from the 30,000 foot level. What are we talking about, right? You need to pull back and look at these type of things objectively from a big picture standpoint. And those type of things apply in so many areas of your life. Think about your long-term investments. If you just put money in your 401k in your business and your employer contributes and stuff like that, you need to go in there every now and then and rebalance and see how things are doing and figure out if you're the right strategy for the age you are in your career and these type of things. If you forget about it, it's going to surprise you at some point, and it's no different from what we're talking about here.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You have to take a look at it at a frequency, right? And whatever frequency is right for what you're doing, taking a look at it and knowing the details, but also being able to zoom out and say, okay, how does this fit into the bigger picture and the direction you're going and all of those things.
Yeah, exactly. Duncan has
I know. I love Duncan's comment.
That's no different on the human intelligent. We're all walking black boxes, 100%.
That's so true.
And so I highly recommend, I enjoy listening to him more and more, is Scott Adams from the Dilbert cartoons. He does for free every single day on YouTube, a live stream. And he talks current events and things of this nature. But more importantly, he talks persuasion and how people think and act and talk and things like this. And Duncan's comment triggered that with me, because one of the things that he talks about relative to persuasion is cognitive dissonance and things of this nature, but also mind reading and being able to look at things, because so often we think that we know what someone else is thinking. We don't. We don't know their motivations or their thinking. So when people try and attribute, oh, I know what you're doing, no, you don't. That's mind reading, right? And so building out that skill set for understanding how people influence and persuade, because you're doing that to people when you're working on something, right? Let's say you want to raise at work, and people are also doing this to you, right? And so you always need to be aware of these tactics and techniques. You don't even need to use them. You need to be aware. Another good example in that area is, let's say that you're looking to buy a car, right? And car salespeople, right? We're hyper aware of the games and things that they play. Oh, boy, that I don't know about that price. Let me check with my manager on that. I don't know if we can do this, right? and you're like, yeah, whatever. Or or they're playing the low monthly payment game, right? And then you pull out the calculator and you're like, holy crap, that's a lot of money, right? And they're like, oh, you aren't supposed to have a calculator, and all those types of things. It's funny. If you can't tell, I enjoy that process of negotiating car purchases. My wife hates it. And one time I tried to do good cop, bad cop with her. I was like, okay, we're going to go into this dealership to look at this car. I just want to get some more information and things like this. Here's what I need you to do. Anything that I ask you about, you hate. So if I say, do you like this red color? You say, no, I don't like red. If I say, do you like air conditioning? No, I don't like air conditioning, whatever. And so we're talking with the salesman and these type of things. I'm like, well, honey, what do you think of the color of this car? Do you like this red? Oh yeah, that's really nice.
It all fell apart right there.
Supposed to say no.
no. And she's like, what? So awesome. I like it.
Well, and I don't know if this is where you're headed with that, but right, some of the things that we don't love doing, like influencing or just some of these different things about storytelling and how we read people. That we know things are changing. It's not just from AI, but like as we look ahead, this is why we always talk about with culture, leadership development. To us, it's like this, they're together. Because if you want to shift culture, you have to change how you're leading. You can't stay over here and have the culture you want over here. It's just not going to happen. But it's a completely different set of skills that people are really uncomfortable to lead into.
Yes. And I've heard many times too, just around influence on like, we do need to learn how to influence others, but even this other side of like, do I want others to influence me? And obviously there's examples like the car salesman, right? That's really trying to influence you to buy a car. But I think it's also around understanding what people value. So like if I value that we have a strong allergen control plan, say that that's on my list, then I'm happy if someone's influencing me to do what's best to close those gaps. Because I might not know, right? It might not be my area, or I might not be the executor, but I have this goal of we need a stronger allergen control plan. And so as people are figuring out what the best solutions are, then I do want them to influence me to go in the right direction. And so being able to influence overall helps the organization move in the right direction, especially when we talk about middle managers, right? That's driving culture. When they have those skills, they're able to provide the best information, right, to their top leadership to be able to influence them on the right direction to go. to go in,
Right.
even as they have those, these big strategies and stuff, making sure that your middle managers have those skills. That's exactly what you want, because you want them to influence you to go in the right direction versus someone that doesn't have the right influence skills. You might think that, oh, that's not the best direction just because that person does not know how to influence.
Right. Absolutely. And that's an important point to hear, Tia, in that a lot of times we don't think part of what we're doing in a job is to influence up, and that is absolutely important. One of the companies that I work with, so I'm helping with their quality things, and of course, stuff like this. And every week I put together a quick little 1-pager email summary for my boss. And in that, so in the past, I would have just been very much, here are the facts type things.
Right, yeah.
But I actually put in that report now things that I'm looking at or things that I'm worried about. So last week it's like, oh, well, there was a slight quality defect we saw in some product. Nothing significant, nothing that is going to cause complaints. But I put it in the report because I wanted my boss to know, the person I'm working with, that, hey, I'm seeing this out there and I'm a little concerned about it. And we're going to be watching this closely. Right. That type of relationship and being able to share that information up within the organization is critical.
Yeah, absolutely. And knowing how to do that, right? Like just how to communicate that and what to communicate.
Oh, that's a good point too. Right. Don't be the sky is falling Debbie Downer, like from Saturday Night Live, where everything is always bad news. And when people see you coming, it's like, right. They don't want to talk to the quality person because it's all bad news all the time. No. Make sure and share good news too.
Right.
Yes. I think that goes back to, Tia, what you're talking about. Like, what do people value? And I think oftentimes, or for a long time, we heard, right, you have to speak the language of the C-suite, which is often, we think, money, or that's what people will say.
Yeah.
It's not that money isn't, obviously money is important. We're all, in this because we have things that we need to do, and that takes money. Yeah. But at the end of the day, there's also other things that are driving people. And I think we forget that even with the C-suite, it's not always just the bottom line. Especially, I think in this day and age, we can also leverage things like sustainability. And there's much more around brand awareness and reputation because of all the social media influences.
Yes. Yeah.
And so those are areas that, especially as food safety leaders, how do we lean into these other things that people are valuing about the organization and just have real speak about them?
Yeah, absolutely. And then when you brought this up, Jill, like saying like, all they care about is money. Like, I would even say dive deeper than that. Like, what about money? Because a lot of times, depending on what part of where you at in your career in the organization, right? If the company makes another $1 billion, that might not really impact, right, my money, maybe a little bit, right? But is that really the true driver, that the organization makes another, $1 billion or $1 million? I don't know. It might. Or could it be that I have a project for cost savings? And so my value is money, but it's driven by this cost savings goal. Or is it like, think about like, what does it mean when you say they care about money? What exactly do they care about? And it might be, hey, we need to make this goal because my 20% bonus comes from that. That might be it. But knowing exactly what they value will help you gather what you need, right, to be able to influence them. Because now you can say, right, like this will prevent this, which will lead to more, increase in profit, and therefore you will make your 20% bonus, right? So now you can put that together.
And we can go further than bonus, because money is just money. What is it doing? Is it helping with retirement? Is it helping with your dream job? Is it sending your kids to college? Is it to buy a house? Like, there's always something more behind money.
Yes.
Yeah. And a good way to think about this too, on that point, and I've used this to work with senior leadership on different initiatives that I was working on, is what is your profit margin on your product? So let's say, for example, when all is said and done at the end of the day, taxes are all paid, EBITDA, all that kind of good stuff, that you've got a 10% profit margin on your product that your sales team is going out and selling. Well, guess what? If you're able to save $1 of costs inside, that is 10 times greater than selling product. So if you're able to, in the organization, initiate $1 million in cost savings, that's equivalent to 10 million, no, 100 million in sales, right? 10%.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden the organization goes, oh, right? Because getting 100 million more in sales is really, really hard. And so it allows that focus to shift, right? It's back to our point around influencing and things of this nature. And part of this too, and this kind of gets into what we wanted to talk about here today, is with the World Economic Forum, is in an organization, there are certain people, especially, the larger the company, the kind of the bigger the bell curve, but there's certain people, I'm sure you guys have seen this too, as you look back in your career, there are certain people that you would go to who seemed to have a better handle on what was coming down the road, right?
Mm-hmm.
They weren't just reacting to things. They were looking at trends. They were seeing what was going on, and they were the predictors in the organization. They were out there ahead of the curve. And I think really as we were preparing for the chat here today, with the World Economic Forum, the future of jobs. So a report came out here a few months ago. It's almost 300 pages long. So everybody, take a breath. We're not gonna read you the report, but I am gonna put it in the link with the food safety chat database, so you can go through the entire report. But one of the things that we did in here for the different areas of the topic, and I think I've got this figured out now where we can actually read this, so that's good, is we went through this and kind of figured out within the 5 main sections within this document, what were some of the things that really stuck out. And I pulled some graphs out of here from that. So I wanted to kind of go through those, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Earlier this week when we were at Food Safety Consortium, we shared some data actually from this report, because it's really compelling to think about how much core skills are expected to change over the next few years.
Right.
And I think that's part of, we're always it feels like we're always trying to play catch up, when really, where do we want to spend our energy, especially if we're like headed over here?
Yeah.
Right.
And culture is over here, not always necessarily right here in this lane.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And so what's good about this as well is, so I've had the good fortune to travel internationally over my life. And one of the things that is always amazing to me, and this is why I think looking at a worldwide report is important, is once you get outside of the United States and get out of our little bubble, the rest of the world doesn't follow our news. They're doing their own thing. And it's kind of a relief in some ways. So if you're in New Zealand and you're watching the local news and things of this nature, the world is completely different. And it gets you out of this self-reflective state that you're in those areas, and it helps to widen your perspective. And so looking at worldwide reports, you may think, this is the whole world. What does this matter to me? No, it does. And it may impact you in ways you may not realize. Yeah. So with that, the first section of this report, and let's see how this works. Yeah, there we go. That's more readable. So one of the first graphs I pulled out here relative to this report was the report on what they're saying are the global landscape and the greatest shortage of labor. And this is something in this Europe portion here of this report that I thought was really, really fascinating, which is at the top of this list is these are all skilled trades. Isn't that interesting? So bricklayers, carpenters, plumbers, metal workers, sheet metal, these two top categories are all trades. So I interpret that as, okay, that means worldwide, they're really gearing up for a lot of growth, right? A lot of building, a lot of new cities, all these type of things that need to take place. And then you can kind of see below that in this graph, how these support functions then, right? So if you have a bunch of new workers in an area and things of this nature, you're going to need more doctors. You're going to need more nurses. You're going to need more infrastructure for IT. And you can, as you read down through this list, and look what's right here in the middle, food processing.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
I know. I love that it actually says food processing, not just food, because that's often just food service retail.
Right, that's true.
Then exactly. Processing is actually big on the list.
Yeah, a lot of times that get lumped in. You're correct. Absolutely. And let's see. So I found that really interesting here on that piece of it. So let's see. So I'm going to switch this view back here because it's the next graph. Let's see. Okay, that's the full screen layout. Sorry. Sometimes these things are kind of goofy. And so if I move forward.
Well, and I think that's one of those trends, right, that we've been seeing over and over. And I think it's really interesting how there's these cycles with, how do we how do we get more people prepared for these different roles? Because I think we've siloed so many people, like your future is college. But we've forgotten, like, there's so many other things that are valuable and needed and fulfilling. And so it's fun to see on this. I mean, it's not fun to see that there's a shortage on the report, but right, there's all these opportunities as we go forward in different spaces.
Yeah,
exactly.
Where those opportunities are, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you're interested, but even like opportunities in terms of what do we need in the world to be solved,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yep, absolutely. And let's see.
Yeah.
So there was some cool graphs here, but it's not wanting to share them.
But even as we think about that, I think that also brings up part of why when we talk about like where we're with some of our skills and competencies today, like why they need to continue to evolve, because these roles are changing, the workforce is changing, our needs are changing. And so, some of the things that we've hung on to for a long time, which are completely important, right? Like technical knowledge and problem solving, root cause analysis, critical thinking, super important.
Yes.
But yet there's this whole other bucket of skills that we need for culture, for human skills, for better interaction as we're thinking about what the workforce of the future looks like. Not only just by jobs and roles, but even humans. And that's the Mercer report that we could talk about later.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Really, I want to make this bigger, and it's not. Let me do it.
Is that the one on jobs on the rise? No.
So this is macro trends driving business transformation, and this is adoption of new and frontier technologies, digital access, ESG standards came in at number 3. So environmental, social, and governance, and we're seeing a lot more of that in these type of reports. Number 4, rising cost of living, which I find very interesting as well. Right. So we're seeing, so inflation's starting to come down, right? But I think we're all still feeling the pain of that, especially when you go to gas up your car, right? It's like, yay, holy moly.
True. I think that looking at this type of trend is so important as you think about, again, what do people value? Like the first one, up here at 86% is the increased adoption of new and frontier technologies. So even thinking about your organization, we talk about all the time, how do we move out of like manual, right, to digital? Having an organization that's still, decades behind doing manual, paperwork and manual documentation, like even just from a food safety standpoint, people coming into your organization are really looking for organizations that have technology and that's using technology to be efficient. And so when people come in and they're like, oh, you have to do all this stuff on paper, some people, right, and the trends are telling us that some people are going to be like, I don't want to do my work on paper. I know that there's organizations out there where you don't have to use paper. You really can use technology that has really been made to do exactly this type of work.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think along with that, right, there's a lot of factors. So if you're, at your computer, Google Meeker's point. There's this really interesting concept about how technology, right, we all feel it. It's almost adapting logarithmically at this point. But our ability as humans to adapt is this really gradual line on this Meeker's point. And we are at a point where, right, technology is just completely outpacing the ability for humans to adapt. And so we have this really interesting place that humans are at right now where it creates a lot of uncertainty, because prior to this we could kind of adapt along with it because it wasn't advancing as quickly, but now it's just taking off. And I think that is where people are feeling this, like, how do we adopt it? What do we adopt it? How much do we invest? And I think it's that it almost feels like we'll never be able to keep up. So what parts are important, though, to help with business and to help with humans?
Yeah, the example that's going through my mind, right, is growing up, the transition of media for music, right? So it went from records, then 8-tracks and cassettes and CDs, and and that pace just kept picking up, right?
Yeah.
And now we can stream music from all kinds of different sources of what we want to listen to. And that was a good segue, Jill, because that's really what this next slide was talking about here is technology adoption and what type of digital platforms. And number 2 on this graph, education and workforce development technologies.
Yeah.
Right. So that's definitely within your wheelhouse, and what you guys work a lot with people on are those type of skill sets and building those out. And as we know, as we get older in our careers and things like this, we become because kids, like Tia's a young child, right? They pick up new skills and adaptation. I hear this from young parents all the time of how kids will just pick up an iPhone or an iPad and they just start using it, right?
Yeah.
So we're technology adapted, they're technology native, right? It's just part of how they're brought up.
Yeah,
exactly. I also think it creates really, once again, this interesting space where we're connecting with technology so much, and it's, the next generations are native technology users. Are we native human connectors? Yeah. Like, how much of that human to human aspect are we pulling in if technology is what's driving so much of what we see forward?
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I think sometimes people lean on the side, which we see like on this technical side, on like, oh, if I give the technology right, like I can lower the human interaction. But I think what we found over the years is that you can't really do that. You still need those human skills and to interact with one another, to build relationships, to influence, right? Like exactly what we were talking about earlier. Like those things are just as important and continue to be important, right? Like even within this report, it talks about some of the new competencies that must be there, right? They're all around human skills. So even as we see this adoption of technology, the skills that are actually needed are human related.
Well, and I think that's because you can't replace the human part with the technology, but how can you enhance some of what you do for human connection through technology?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And this graph under here, under the global landscape, caught my attention as well, because it's kind of, it's overlaying what you guys are saying. And the headline here is share of organizations surveyed that expect each technology to create or displace jobs ordered by job creation net effect. So big data analytics. So back to my example of logistics. And, logistics is kind of one of those hard industries, right? You've got trucks and they're moving stuff. But the actual analytics of where those trucks are and where they pick things up and how they move and where they go and all these type of things, that's all big data, right? What is the forecast for diesel fuel over the next quarter? All of these type of things. And AI is going to be able then, through big data and analyze this information, figure these things out. And if you work in that field, you need to understand that information.
I really like this. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to add on to that, right? If you're wondering, like, logistics, I think is a great example. Coming from poultry land, I remember we had one scheduler for the entire complex. Like this person knew all the stuff up here, no matter how much you wrote it down, because there were so many factors, like how big a barn was, how far away they were, if, what roads they could be brought in on, when they had to have a clean out. There were all these factors about when you could schedule things to come in. And only one person was like masterful at it. And I'm like, what a business risk. Wow. And so how cool to think about applying big data analytics so that person could actually like go on vacation. So other people could fill in, right? There's all these places where it's going to makes so much sense to be able to leverage.
Well, and part of this too, Jill, that's a good point, is part of it is also fear. And we all know people in our career who hoard information, right? And part of their theory of success in the workforce for them in the past, and there's no way this is going to work in the future, is if I am the keeper of this knowledge, that means I'm indispensable to the organization and they can't fire me or whatever, right? No, that strategy that's gone.
It's true, right? That's not gonna keep you around if you're hoarding information. It's really seen as a negative,
right? And that information is going to go around you now.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
And Duncan, I love your comment about how our brains are already adapted for what we know. And so to think about some of these other things, that's why it's so mind blowing, right? Because we're like, oh my gosh, that is outside of what I can comprehend Versus, like you said, babies' brains, like they will never not know what life was like with this.
Yeah.
And
Right.
so for them, it's completely like, and kids, right? They just soak it all up. But our brains, we still do have the elasticity, like you point out, and the ability to challenge our brain to think different, bigger, and be curious. But we have to be intentional about it.
Right.
Right.
I think that's the big difference. We don't just soak it up anymore. We really need to be more intentional about really exploring what that means so that our brain can really use the elasticity that we have.
Yeah.
Well, and so like for Tia's daughter, and the saying is, the world is born when we are, right? So moving forward, right, we're self-centered people, and we look at things in that way. And for her, the world moves forward from this point. What occurred before her birth is irrelevant.
Right.
And that's just part of what you read about in school. It doesn't really matter. And what's interesting as well on the other end of the spectrum is, it seems just anecdotally, is that the most successful people in life are the people who continue to learn, right? We see the stories of the 90-year-old woman who goes skydiving, right, for the first time, or someone who went back to school and got their doctorate at 65 years old, or things like this, right? It's not necessarily achieving that objective. It's the learning that's the important part, right? We have to keep learning.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And it's something that we talk about even with leaders, right? Like we run into leaders who say, I'm a great leader and I've been great, right? But even as we see, and we're talking about today, is like things are changing, right? And so you have to be on this path of continuous improvement. And you have to continue to develop yourself as a leader, because today you might be a great leader, right? But what about tomorrow, or 5 years from now, or 10 years from now, which is exactly where we're moving to, right? So what skills do you need to be developing right now so that you are a great leader in the future, and so that you can continue to drive your culture, right? If you are not picking up these skills and really becoming better at these skills and improving these skills, then you eventually are going to be a dinosaur, right? Like that we think about with some leaders, where you are leading from a place of old competencies.
Right. And it's the kiss of death, right? And so I always look for this when I'm evaluating food safety systems or programs or culture, like we talk about food safety culture, is if you hear this phrase, it's a guarantee that that company's in trouble. We've always done it that way.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Oh, what? Who cares? Right. It gets back to what Jill was saying earlier, is this acceleration of changes is just increasing logarithmically. And if you don't get caught in, it's a weird thing, is the people who get left behind, it doesn't happen overnight. It's this little incremental pieces day by day that just chip away. And then all of a sudden you wake up one day and you're like, I have no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And now what do you do?
Yeah.
Yeah. It is.
And that gets to this next chart, which is, I think, interesting just from the standpoint of what we see in society. So this is labor market by churn. And leading the list of the labor market that is churning over the most, media, entertainment, and sports. Right? We're seeing this all the time now. The Washington Post laying off large amounts of their staff. All of these print media organizations that are going out of business and can no longer keep up. All of the new competing sources. It's interesting is, so with Twitter, I wasn't really on Twitter in the past, but I've been on it more now, it's amazing how far ahead of the curve that is. Now, part of this is, and this is a whole nother conversation, right, of what do you trust and what do you not trust, which is a huge thing that we need to look at now. But it's ahead of the curve. So I'll see things on there and then I'll see it in the news 2 or 3 days later. And you're like, isn't that interesting?
Mm-hmm. That is interesting, right?
Yes, very much so. And I think the other part when we think about churn is, months ago, I saw this stat that there's 10,000 baby boomers retiring a day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so when we even think about like how just how our workforce looks today is significantly shifting.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, only because I'm up in these ages where I'm like, oh, in 10, 15 years, where am I going to be? 20 years. I probably didn't think about it as much, but right, like everybody before us probably thought the same thing, like these younger generations, are they ready to take over? But I think what's a little bit different is we have a lot more tools available to us, a lot more partners available to us. And so if we, if we're, when I hear people that are concerned about this shift, I think, like, what do we need to start doing? What do you need to start doing to be able to start filling those gaps? Because it's not an unknown, it is a known. And the more we prepare and really be proactive about it, the less disruptions we're going to have in business.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and here's a silver lining piece of this as well, so we don't sound too dour here during our conversation, which is we are technical data people, right? We're technical analytical people who work in food safety and quality assurance and things of this nature. We live for data, right? So that's why when we decided to pull up this topic, I was like, ooh, cool, right? Because we're able to look at these trends and slice and dice.
Yeah.
Which kind of leads to the next one, which is what's the largest job growth? So leading the way, agricultural equipment operators. Isn't that interesting? Heavy truck and bus drivers, vocational education teachers, mechanics and machinery repair. I'm seeing a trend with this, right? Business development professionals. Hey, there we go. Building frame and related trade work, right? So for me, when I look at this and where these jobs are going, this is all infrastructure. Things relative to people and how they live and where they are. And as we know in what we do, all those people got to eat, right?
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely. And just the impact we can make, right? Just as food and beverage organizations, right? Like those people need to eat and the food needs to be safe for them.
Yeah. And on the converse side of this, what's the largest decline? And at the top of this list, data entry clerks, right? That's all going away.
Yay!
Yeah, no
only because how many times have we combed through data and we're like, oh, it came in wrong, transcription errors.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, what I love now is these apps for like your travel expenses, where you just take a freaking picture of the receipt and it goes through and it figures it out and it says, oh, this receipt is for your car rental and here's the total at the bottom, and it automatically plugs it into the expense report for you.
Yeah.
And you're just like, okay, awesome.
Right. Nice, right? It's nice.
Yeah.
You know what I think is amazing about some of this, what we're looking at with like where areas are growing, kind of back to what Duncan said about what we know, to think the majority of these roles, or how much of them, will be things that we have never thought of for jobs.
Yeah.
Like some of these will be so completely brand new. We can't even fathom what they're going to be. And so what will that really look like in the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah. And even as we think about like how these jobs are changing, like we do need to free up that brain power to figure exactly what Jill's talking about, to figure that out, right? Like how are we going to close these gaps that we have? Where's the world moving to, and what do we need, right? In the, they kind of talk about in the, the next 7 years, like what are we going to need going forward? Because like that kind of frees us up to think about those, those things.
Well, go ahead.
I even relate that back to when we are like, if we're the top leader of food safety in our organization, what are we doing to plan for our function going forward?
Yeah.
How are we really using strategy to think about how does this fit into the bigger picture? How are the roles on our team needing to change? What are the new skills that we need to be developing today?
Right.
Yeah.
Like how much time are we doing that versus, I still hear of people who are directors and VPs being pulled into firefighting and, day-to-day work and working a couple levels down because, that's where the need is right now.
Right. Yeah.
So, shifting out of that, like that's a risk that we have in our industry of not being able to be in that space to prepare our groups. And then we're going to still, what does that mean in general of how we're perceived or where we're at?
Yeah. That's a huge risk because we must be business partners, right? Like as we grow, as we start to impact, these different areas, as we introduce new ingredients, right? Like we see, like, as we think about culture, right? Like we really do have to be integrated into the work. And it's hard to build that strategy, right? And put those steps into place when you are executing all the time.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You literally do not have the hours in the day or the hours in the week, hours in the month, right, to be able to do that. And so some of the things that Jill and I have been talking about with people lately is like, how do you start working where you should be working? And what do you need to do to get there? And many times that's not a year solve, right? Like, because we still have to be mindful of the resources, right? How to add additional resources, that type of thing. Like, it's not going to happen overnight, but how do you how do you make that shift year after year so that in the next 3 years, right, you are working where you should be working in your role, and you can start really thinking about how we're going to make these, improvements over the next 5 years.
Yeah.
And so, but if you never right size your organization, or you never really think about the things that Jill's talking about, and like, where do my people need to play, and what type of things do they need to do in their roles, then you're always going to be behind, right? And culture is never really going to catch up to where you need it to be.
Really, really good point. And so part of this as a leader, and Duncan is also kind of, commenting on this as well too here, relative to this. What you need to be doing as a leader in your organization, or whatever level you're at, if you have somebody working for you, you need to be looking at this. And this is why I think this graph is important. Because if you look at these on here, data entry, at admin and secretaries, accounting and payroll clerks, security guards, et cetera, you can see these things being replaced by AI.
Yeah.
And now you need to look at your team and say, okay, who on my team, who's an important contributing member of my team, because that's why they're there.
Yeah.
Is their role going to be around in 5 years? And if not, how do I prepare them for a new role so that when the organization comes to me and says, Bryan, we need to do some cost reductions and headcount reductions, they're not looking at your department. They're looking at somebody else who doesn't provide as much value.
Well, and I always think sometimes it's not always about like headcount reduction, but like, how do we shift to higher value things that can't be done through AI? So where we need people doing more like of the critical thinking that perhaps AI isn't going to help us with, or, the human skills. I always go back to the human skills because AI won't be able to fill that niche.
Yeah. And that's what Austin is commenting on here is right. With new tech, we need soft human skills and critical thinking, which is a perfect segue to our next graph, right? Yay. So this one's a bit of an eye chart here as well, but core skills in 2023. So they're saying analytical thinking, creative thinking, resilience, flexibility and agility. Ooh. Motivation and self-awareness, curiosity, lifelong learning, technological literacy. Look at this list.
Yeah.
If you pull one thing out of our presentation today, it's this slide right here, right?
Yeah.
These are the skills. And notice in here, it's not talking microbiology. These are all people skills. The ability to think and reason and create flex. And I love that number 3 is resilience, flexibility, and agility.
Yes. Number 3, number 4, number 5, even as you think about like 1 and 2, like that's all like we love seeing this, right? Just as coaches, because this is exactly what coaching is all about. And one of the reasons why coaching, even that field, right, is starting to explode, increase, right? Explode. And so it is because these skills are needed, and coaching is it's a unique way of bringing these things out while also honoring who you are as a person.
And effective.
And very effective at it.
So for everybody watching this, is take this slide, and again, right, I'm going to post this information, the whole report in the Food Safety Chat database. But I love on here, they have these color coded by groups. So cognitive skills, engagement skills, ethics, management, etc. But one other thing I wanted to point out here while we're going through this, number 10, quality control. Look at that. Yay.
I love where you talk about kind of the color coding, because if you see anything that's kind of purplish, lavender, there's a lot of them in those top 10, top 15. Those are all very direct human skills.
Yeah,
absolutely. And on the next slide, they kind of break this down then too, relative to what they're calling self-efficacy, working with others, and ethics. Right? Those 3 buckets, oh my goodness, right? As someone who's hired my fair share of people over my career, those 3 areas, so important, right? Are you self-directed? If I give you direction and you say, got it, boss, and off you go, and I don't have to worry about you, you are a valuable employee.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Working with others, right? Are you a jerk, right? If I'm a jerk and people see me coming and everybody's like, "Oh," right, and you don't want to deal with me because I'm just such a butthead, you're not going to get very far. And then of course ethics, right? If oh my goodness, right? If someone even has a whiff of ethical issues, personally or professionally or things of this nature, right?
Yeah.
They're no longer trustworthy.
No. And and those things, especially as leaders, are so important because the new generations of workforce coming in, they have less tolerance for going outside of those things.
Yeah.
Right.
That is a really big driver. What report came up, was it last week, that culture is actually took over as the driver for where people are deciding to work versus compensation.
And we see it, one of the questions that people ask us all the time is around, how do I figure out a company's culture, right? Before I sign on the dotted line, right? Before I say, yes, I want to come and work for you. So it is top of mind for people as they decide where they want to work and decide if they want to stay where they are, right? Like we have those conversations as well, where people are trying to figure out, how do I help change the culture at my organization? Or how do I get out of an organization that has a toxic culture?
Yeah. Well, and think about the tools that you can do that now is kind of those barriers to reaching out to people in those potential companies has lowered. So if I'm looking at working for a new company, I'm going to look them up on LinkedIn and I'm going to contact people randomly who work at that company and ask them.
Absolutely.
Why not? And let's see. So 2 slides left to go here. So the next one is workforce strategies. So the share of organizations surveyed planning to adopt these workforce strategies, investing and learning and training on the job, accelerate the automation of processes, like we saw in the earlier slides, transition existing staff from declining to growing roles.
Yeah, we talked about that. Yeah.
So the top 3 are all around how do we take the workforce that we have and help them transition to these new roles. So that's good, right? Companies aren't saying, okay, well, we're going to pitch out all these guys and we'll find all new people. No, they're saying we need to help our staff reach these new levels of performance and areas of expertise that we're going to need. Yeah. And guess what? If you identify that and take that to your employer and talk with them about that, you're golden.
Yeah.
Well, and once again, we advocate for the middle manager layer to really lean in here, because I think so often, we're like, well, we've already gotten here. We've always talked about, right? We've had success. We're doing pretty good. We really need this for our frontline workers. Yeah. Yes and yes. But our middle managers are the translators. They are the ones helping navigate all of these new situations and these new work environments. And so we really have to think about how we're retooling this middle manager layer to really prepare for what this all is going to mean in 5 years.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. One thing that I love about this chart too is that organizations, like even that top one, that organizations are investing in learning, right? And so, like, Jill, there's a stat that we've showed before where like top leadership or executive leaders, they support the development of people like 80%. And so that, we've talked to groups all the time on ask for your development, right? Like be the advocate for your development, because your leaders want you to develop. They want to invest in your learning. And so ask, right? Advocate for yourself. Figure out like what is it that you need, and then ask for those things, because research and data and even this new report showed that organizations want to invest in their people. They want to be able to really honestly survive through this shift that's happening now.
Right. Well, and hiring and developing new talent is extremely expensive. And so it makes much more sense for organizations to develop the talent that they already have on staff. So use that to your advantage. So
there's a great chart that'll come up if you already have it. Look at, I'm like, further in the report, there's a great one that shows, right? The top thing to do is improve your talent, keep your talent. You have to win the war on talent to be able to keep people and attract people.
Absolutely.
Yep,
Absolutely.
and that's number one. 48% share of organizations surveyed that identify these business practices as promising ways to increase talent availability in the next 5 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I
Re-
mean, that's big.
Yeah.
That's big. I mean,
I don't think people always want to leave companies, but if there isn't a way for them to develop and be promoted, why would they stay?
right.
Yeah.
So
And yeah, I think, we all know that from a personal standpoint as well, that happened in my career. I was in a role and the company saw me in a certain way. And I realized that if I wanted to advance to the next level, I had to find a new place to work.
Yeah.
It was a hard decision, but in retrospect, it was the right thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because,
Ah.
why would you say?
I like
Yeah.
that. Woo! We covered a lot today.
I know. So yeah, we're already at the hour mark already. So let's kind of bring this up to the 30,000 foot level, Joe and Tia. What thoughts or next steps you want people to go away with today?
Prepare your people.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, we talked about wanting better food safety. Well, that starts with having, building stronger leaders.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And start investing in, like Jill said, preparing your people and learning what these new competencies are and how to get them. Right.
And of course,
all the time.
Totally biased. I'm going to plug us, but that's exactly what our leadership development journey does.
Yeah.
It is progressive so that as you are developing as a leader, these skills to be able to do this work, because people go, how do we do this?
Yeah.
We have that in our program because we've been there, we've done that. We have the outline and the guidance to be able to do that.
Absolutely.
Yep, 100%. Full endorsement for Jill and Tia in that area. Definitely reach out to them. And part of this as well is, in my parting thought around this too, is don't sit back and think that it's your boss's job to create your training program and figure out your path. That's your job, right?
Yeah.
You need to go to your boss and say, hey, I've been looking at this data and I sat in on this food safety chat this week and there's some interesting trends going on. And I would like to develop my skills in a particular area.
Yeah.
Win-win, right?
Absolutely.
And I think that's the other part, Bryan. If you feel like you have to do it alone or you have to figure it all out, you don't. Because even the work that you do with Food Leadership Group, right? You have portals to information so people can have like a one-stop shop. You don't have to go look and try to Google and find everything.
Right.
Like,
Exactly.
you use the resources that are here to make life easier.
Yeah. And if you're trying to even figure it out, right? And you are trying to figure out how to move your culture forward and what type of process do you need to put into place? At Catalyst, we also do strategy sessions where we help organizations figure out, like, okay, where are you today and where do you want to go in terms of culture?
Surprise, they're coaching based.
Of course they are. Of course they are. Everything that we do is coaching based, which makes it a little bit different because we talk about values and beliefs, which is core to culture. And we help organizations bring that out. Like, what is it that your people value? What do you value, right? What do you believe around your culture currently? And where do you want to go? And so we help organizations figure that out and put steps into place so that you can actually start doing food safety culture, right? Like, you can actually start doing those improvements versus just collecting data, looking at it, right? And doing the same things you do every year.
Yep. Well said. And with that, we'll close out our chat for this week. Man, that went fast. So hopefully this was of value to people because, and again, like we talked about here in the beginning, is sometimes you've got to sit back and look at the big picture. And so hopefully this today gives you an idea of that big picture. And always a fascinating conversation. Jill and Tia, thank you for joining me this week. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Bryan. Thanks everyone out there.
On the chat. I mean, taking an hour out of your time weekly to do this with us is an investment, and it's hopefully you agree that it's worth it, because I know it is for me as well. So thank you everyone for attending, and we will see you back here next week at the same time. So Friday, 8 a.m. Mountain Time, 10 a.m. Eastern, live streaming on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter. And join us for that next chat. We'll bring some more experts on the show, and I'll get more great information out of them like we had on today's chat as well. So thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend. Enjoy yourself. Relax a little bit. I know I'm going to enjoy the sun here as well. So thanks, everybody. Thanks, Jill and Tia, and we'll see everybody next week.
Bye.